when I was in my early 20s, the first like real job I ever had was working in retail, and we had a regional manager who was one of my best bosses ever. And he taught me what he called the 11th commandment, which I want to pass on to all of you because I think it comes up a lot. And the 11th commandment was simply this: never let the rules get in the way of good business. And this was a national chain that I managed a store. We had a huge, 8-10-inch manual. I'm trying to remember what it was called now. It was the store manual, all the rules. And we had to follow those rules because we were a national chain. But he taught us this: never let the rules get in the way of good business, because sometimes things can be a little too rigid. And the smart thing to do is to bend the rules a little bit. So as that applies to us in not just the DJ world, but in the entrepreneurial world, what I see online a lot is people saying, what do you do when? Right. And I just saw one, what do you do when somebody like physically attacks you? And what do you do when somebody is rude? And somebody, there's all the different scenarios. And you need to have a plan. You need to have some rules in place for you and your employees. You need to have a contract. That contract has to have some rules, some things that you do in your business. But I also see, it comes up all the time: what do you do when a client wants to change your contract? And the first thing that comes up every time is absolutely not. If they want to change the contract, the heck with them, move on. Never let the rules get in the way of good business. If, for example, you're dealing with a client who has a little bit of a change in, your setup time, and you might just have to work around that, or it might be something as as simple as wanting to change the payment terms. And don't let your rules hold you down. You need rules, and but you need a reason for them. Like if you can't explain it, I always laugh when somebody says, well, why is that your reason? Why do you do it that way? And people say, that's our policy. But that's not, that's what, not why. Like, why is that your rule? So if you can't explain it without being defensive, maybe you should relook at that. But take that concept of never let the rules get in the way of good business and apply it to everything that you do. I see it everywhere I go now, and especially with larger organizations. And I kind of get it. They have a national chain. They have to do a rule that applies to everybody. But it's how we get the absurd zero tolerance stuff, when a 5-year-old kid gets kicked out of school because he pinched a girl's butt, and that's sexual harassment, and he doesn't even know what sexual harassment is or means, and so now he's expelled. And or a kid brings aspirin to school and he's violated the drug policy, or just absurd things. Like, at some point you need to have a little bit of common sense with this stuff. So I hope that helps, and I hope you apply it to your contracts, to your programming music, right? Like, my basic rule at a wedding or any event was, I don't want to play the same song twice. But I violated that rule many times. There were just times when it just had to happen for one reason or another. And rather than just sticking with the hard and fast rule, I did that. Or instead of doing you got a really great mix, and the bride comes over and she wants you to play something that doesn't fit the mix, right? So your rules are, no, I've got to do this mix just a certain way. And it's like, man, I've just stopped a song, midway and went, hey, Julie wants to hear this right now. What do you think? And the place goes nuts, and we play it. And, violate the rules once in a while. Never let the rules get in the way of good business. For example, one last example, my rule is 1 minute. I never do that. See you next week.